Be the Good with Kate shows each of us how it is possible to find and follow our passions at any age. But not only that, we can do this while making the world a better place along the way. I'm Kate Chericello, and I'm on a mission to shine a light on the positive news all around us. I hope Be the Good with Kate inspires you to live your purpose and go out and be the good in the world. Guests have included a Broadway music director, ex-convict, hospital clown, nonprofit leaders, people who've lost those closest to them, people who have found their calling in their 60s, and my kindergarten teacher. Join me each week as I have the honor of sharing these stories with you. You can find Be the Good with Kate on all podcast platforms and YouTube. Subscribe there or go to katechericello.com/bethegood to be updated when new episodes are released.
Welcome back to Be the Good with Kate. I am so happy to introduce you to Sophie Jacobs, who connected with me because of a prior guest, episode 95, Dr. Miriam. Wonderful episode on career change, which is a topic that comes up in pretty much every episode of Be the Good with Kate. So definitely check that out. Episode 95, a focus on career change. And I'm so glad that Dr. Miriam connected me with Sophie. Sophie is someone who quit a high-profile startup job to live at a Buddhist monastery. She was ordained as a Buddhist nun, then disrobed and went on to write a book about how to trust your inner knowing through a series of personal elemental essays, all before the age of 25. Such a unique person, and I'm so excited for you to hear more from Sophie. So Sophie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kate. I'm super excited to have this discussion.
Oh, my pleasure. And please tell us all more about who you are.
Wow, that's a big one. I would say first and foremost, I'm someone who's like a ravenous seeker of the truth and of the depth of things, and that can be pretty intense, but it's really kind of landed in my life in various manifestations. But from the age of 5, when I started to have, I guess, thoughts of my own, it was always like, okay, well, what's the meaning of life? Like, why are we here? And just having these like really existential kind of questions forming in my mind at an age where I didn't get that like modeled or reflected back to me. So for a long time, I was just kind of floating in my inner world. And, like most folks, you know, I am a woman and was conditioned as a woman, and with that conditioning came kind of a sense of needing to people please and always be kind and nice and do things the way that other people wanted them to be done. And I struggled with kind of my what I felt kind of was like a spiritual longing in myself versus what I saw reflected in the outer world and what other people around me were doing. And that kind of hit reared its head when COVID hit, and it felt kind of like this point of no return for me, where I just graduated from college with a psychology degree, which was something that I was interested in, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do because I didn't almost see reflected something deeper that was going on within myself. And so my friend had started a company and just happened to invite me onto the team because she saw kind of like certain gifts that I had that would be fitting for like a people ops role. And so I kind of just went into it without really having a sense of like why I was doing it, other than the fact that she invited me and like it would be seen as like successful in the outer world. And quickly I started to realize that I was burning out. Like I'd be spending like 12-hour days on the computer. I really wouldn't be taking care of myself. And I just felt more and more like my energy was depleting. And it just didn't feel like there was a sense of like resourcing going on in what I was doing. And so it kind of spoke to me in these energetic senses. So, I feel like I have I'm a very like highly sensitive person, and oftentimes like things speak to me in energetics. And so I was like noticing these states of like being contracted. And basically I had an experience where I just felt more and more and more contracted. And that to me signaled a sense that I was not really living out my purpose. And as someone who really is called to kind of live out my purpose, and it almost feels like this sense of like it will not leave me alone, like this longing for truth, this longing for real liberation from heart and mind, which feels to me like the ultimate form of healing. This job was like not it. And so I can go into story around like what evolved from that point, but essentially like I was kind of faced at a crossroads of like, do I, choose things that on the surface seem appropriate and seem like they would lead to security and safety and success, or do I choose something much more real to me, but much more uncertain? And it was kind of this choice that kind of almost became not a choice when my house burned down, and I was forced to confront the fact that I really was burnt out and on all levels. Like this happened back in August of 2020, and it was like about the 4-month mark of working there. And that really, yeah, that triggered this sense of, okay, there's something deeper going on. I need to stop and listen to myself. Especially because that experience of my house burning down, I was home alone that night, and I had experienced, I think, what I perceived to be an intuition to leave just a couple hours before it had burned down. So it was that experience of knowing that like I had some sense of intuition to leave, which saved my life. And it was that very kind of like inner knowing that it felt like I was neglecting over and over and over again in my work, in my relationships. And it was experiencing like itself in my body through like physical symptoms of contraction and just a sense of offness and dis-ease. And so that really was the catalyst for basically everything else I've done so far.
Wow. There's so much to dive into there.
Yeah,
And I was thinking that every step of the way, and then you just kept adding another layer to it.
right.
There's so much there. First of all, a pandemic starts, you start a new job, your house burns down all within the same year.
Mhm.
That's so much. And you realize that you're not fulfilling your purpose. And that concept of fulfilling your purpose and feeling that need, that's something that we all can relate to some way. And that's what, this whole show's about, right? Finding our passions and then making the world a better place while following them. Is that desire to have a purpose as opposed to just a maybe quote unquote job, or, continuing on like a hamster wheel, so to speak? Did you have that feeling of purpose your whole life? Was there a catalyst that made you go, today is the day when I need to change everything? I mean, it sounds like you've always been this kind of person, but please expand on that a bit.
No, that's a really good question. I do think that I've always had this sense of like purpose, but like purpose to me and how I define it is almost like a sense of homecoming, like a sense of being at home in my soul or spirit or just energy, or like however you want to describe it. It's a sense of being kind of at peace in the present moment. And so it's a state of like not wanting to run away or not wanting to hide, or it's kind of like a return. And so that can be kind of manifested and expressed in different ways. Sometimes like your purpose will first be like, I need to write this book, and then maybe you'll never write a book again and you're not meant to be an author your whole life. But at the time that it's happening, there's kind of like, for me, it's almost like the energetic sense of like a resting place, like a place where I can rest. And when I'm not at peace, it's almost like there's kind of this like digging or sense of like needing to flee or hide or like move myself in some way. And there's like a dislocation that happens in that, or a fragmentation or disconnection. And when we're disconnected from that, oftentimes people tend to like try to like grab onto something from the external world and the outside to kind of fulfill that, which makes a lot of sense, like especially if you're not really understanding or what's going on. Like it makes sense that you'd want to like find something to like get back to that place again. So that's kind of how I would make sense of purpose. It's not just like the thing that you do in your career. It can be that's definitely an expression of it. But like to me, my original and primary impulse of a purpose is presence. And so that can be kind of reflected in a myriad of ways.
I love that so much. And I'm so glad that you pointed out that it doesn't have to be your career,
Yeah.
right? Your purpose is so many other things. And that's so important for us to remember, especially in this world that is very much like goal oriented, that's a bottom line, filling all those buzzwords in there.
Mhm.
And I really love that you honed in on that. And then tying that into what you mentioned about that feeling of like a contraction, like something was off, that you weren't, that something just was. I really want you to dive into that a little bit for us, because again, that's something that in our fast-paced world, it's so easy to ignore those signs.
Mhm.
And it's so crucial for us to listen to our body and our soul, to
Yes.
be able to, because otherwise that's how sicknesses can come about, or just depression, or anything, just sadness in general can come about when we're not really focused on what we need and to fulfill us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to like kind of hone in here because I think a lot of people experience symptoms like this and don't know how to make sense of it. And it to me, what it felt like mentally was almost like, and seems like an extreme, but it was like a form of like being in prison. Where it's like, oh, like there's just something like I can't get out of this rut, or I can't get out of this feeling of like offness. And it's like this sense of like wanting to like escape or be freed. Um, and it can be like a really subtle thing of like, I want to get out of like what I'm currently feeling right now, or um, a sense of like, there's this energetic sense of like contraction of like making you feel small inside of yourself. And it can present as like anxiety, or like the physical sensations of just like balling yourself in. I know for myself, and I didn't mention this, but I was previously in a relationship that also ended at the time like COVID hit. And one of the like primary things that I was experiencing in that relationship was like anxiety, and how it manifested was like in the ball of my throat. And so it was just this like incessant um, feeling of like energetic contraction right here. And it was awful. It was just like, how do I make this go away? But the thing about making something like that go away is that's a really great intention that we have because we want to be freed from it. But oftentimes what happens is, and many of us get stuck in this like Chinese finger trap where we're trying to like will it away with our mind. And it makes sense, right? Like you want it to just go away. You want to feel good in your body. You want to feel like good in your, in yourself. But often what happens is that Chinese finger trap is only makes it worse, only makes it more contracted and more tense. And the thing that I had to realize through all of my experiences of disconnect and coming back into connection with myself was exactly that, coming back into connection with myself. And in a society that completely like puts the mind at like this altar, and outsources all our information in terms of like the cognitive and rational realm of being, which isn't wrong. It's just that's our priority, and that's where we place most of our value in our culture. That we really not trained or taught to connect with our body, like the physical sensations of our body, or even just how to really be in relationship with our mind. And so, because of that, like, I think a lot of us have this conditioning to really believe the content of our mind, like day in and day out. But in a sense, like, that's not all there is to life. And we have this body, we have this being. And a lot of us have actually abandoned and neglected these aspects of ourselves that actually hold a lot of intelligence. And so, really, what needed to happen was first to listen and to come into right relationship with my body. And it's interesting because in that spirit of coming into right relationship with my body and developing um like a loving relationship with my body by actually being in it, paying attention to it, listening to it, um there was a sense that I was actually like being in right relationship with the earth as well, like to the land, and also to other people. So it felt kind of like this mm, I don't know, this center which I could practice right relationship with everything. But it first had to start with my body and my emotions and my thoughts. And so yeah, I mean, really all of that, those physical sensations and this sense of offness really actually led me back into connection. It kind of like pushed me up against a wall and like really made me um question like how do I want to live? What's most important to me? But I had to really go through a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown because this stuff just isn't widely accepted or taught. So there is
It's
a
true.
certain
It's
level
true.
of, yeah, risk and kind of unknownness about it.
You know what? My favorite kinds of podcast episodes, because I'm constantly listening to them, are the ones where I'm walking and listening and my brain just starts to go because what the guest is saying is just giving me so much to think about and really question. And I feel like you are doing that right now for the listeners, for me. And I just love that. And I have to now ask you then more about you were a Buddhist nun
Yeah,
and then you left. And
yeah,
then what happened? So that path, I'd
yeah.
really love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say, it's funny. Someone asked me recently, like, what was your favorite part of working at the startup job? Um, and I know that's not what you asked me, but the funny thing about what I will say is like my favorite part was getting to like lead this like meditation before our scrums meeting every morning, which was like 3 minutes long. So that to me was signaling like, okay, there's something here. And even my mom picked up on it because I was staying at my mom's place because of COVID. And after I quit my job and we were living at one of her like friends' family's place, like after the fire. And I remember one night she asked me like, why haven't you thought about going to a monastery? Like it just really seems like you're um like that's what interests you. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, you're right. She kind of, I don't know, she kind of like just redirected me back to something that I already knew inside of myself, but sometimes people can like help support you kind of in that reckoning. And so I I had a, meditation practice and it was something that felt truer to me than anything else that I had ever experienced in my life. It was a subtleness to it too, but I guess in the midst of like all of this loss and devastation, that was kind of like the one grain of sand that felt like remotely true in my life. And so I was like, okay, even though this is just one grain of sand, it's not this like big thing. I don't have these big elaborate plans about like my next 5 years. I'm just gonna trust in that grain of sand. Like, let's see what happens if I like pick this grain of sand up and say, I trust you. And so it was really, it started out as this really, really, really small trust in something that felt real and true to me. So I just started making this like spreadsheet of like all these different monasteries across the US, but it was COVID. So essentially, most of the monasteries were like closed off for visitors or volunteers, except one monastery, which happened to be just an hour away from me. It was a female Buddhist monastery in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. And they were able to take me in, provided that I do like this 2 week quarantine, which ended up being like me just going on 2 weeks of meditation retreat, which was awesome in their backyard. Um, so yeah, I just kind of trusted that sense that like, I really wanted to have my 20s kind of lay this foundation of inner trust, but also just mental training of like this capacity to relate to my mind in a way that was, freeing and be mindful. And so that was really my intention about going there. And when I was there, I just had a lot of experiences of just opening and expanding of what I thought to be true. It was kind of like it was taking all of this stuff in the muck of my mind and it was like allowing it all to settle. And in that settling, there could be like things that could kind of emerge that like I wasn't aware of before because I was so caught in these like mental tangles. And so I was just noticing how the practice was kind of helping me to actually reconnect to myself on all these different levels, like body, mind, spirit. And I really practiced in the spirit of reconnection. So one of the ways that the Buddha taught was like the four foundations of mindfulness. That's mindfulness of your body, mindfulness of your feelings, mindfulness of your thoughts, and mindfulness of, consciousness itself. And so that was really like the root of it all. That's kind of how I practiced. And in that practicing, it's funny, what emerged was kind of this it was one day in like this winter retreat period. I remember writing a lot during that time as well. And something came up to me that just because my mind was settled and my body was still and like, back to the sense of like I was kind of at peace in myself. Like there was a sense of landing and not needing to be anywhere. This thought emerged, which was, you should write a book about intuition. And it just kind of landed in my body in a way I was like perceptive enough to kind of notice that it had some sort of energetic sense of like opening. It was almost like a bud that was like being opened up in me. I don't know how else to describe it, but like it's really tricky because a lot of these things like are energetic senses and sometimes
Well, I'm just so enjoying how you're describing all the different aspects of life
yeah,
and thought. So that's why I keep smiling. It's like, ooh, that's such a great way to frame it. So continue.
yeah. Yeah, so I think due to my practice of like reconnecting back to myself by simply just witnessing my experience as it is, this thought landed. You should write a book about intuition. And again, it was like this grain of sand that felt really small, but it felt true at the time. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna trust it. We're just gonna take this tiniest amount of kind of faith in this one thing that feels like really actually crazy, but I'm just gonna put like one little, grain of faith in. So I just started to write journal entries around this theme of intuition, and it almost became like a meditation to me, where I would just continually go back again and again and again to what is true for me. How do I understand this theme? So it's like intuition kind of became this like tree trunk for all of these other like things. It's like intuition connects to inner knowing. Intuition connects to like meditation and mindfulness, but it also connects to like feeling like a sense of belonging in yourself. And how do you like navigate that in relationships with other people? And it made me realize that I think part of the reason that I was so interested in that theme was precisely because I wasn't connected, like I wasn't aligning my actions with the place in me that felt at peace and at home. And I was also experiencing something in the monastery where like the structure and the more like political, structural, institutional aspects of Buddhism in the way that it was shaped in the monastery was really becoming difficult for me and like becoming like almost like contracted for me in the sense that I felt like I almost had to be this holy person or a version of myself that I wasn't yet or
Yeah.
ever. And so I was noticing that going on in the monastery of like feeling like I had to believe everything that they were teaching me. And I was slowly noticing like this disconnection from my own truth. And again, it presented itself in like terms of like energetic contraction in my body and a sense of like stagnation in my being and like not being able to express my feelings, not being able to like be creative and, like have this kind of energy flow in my body. And so it dawned on me that I needed to find a way to both connect with other people and belong with other people, but not sacrifice my own truth. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. Like, how do we connect with others without sacrificing our truth?
Absolutely.
And so it was that main kind of dilemma and question that I had that brought me into writing this book, The Intuition Experiment. And it really was an experiment because I did not have the answers. So it was just me experimenting, just committing every single day, writing something down, like asking different people their thoughts, meditating on it, looking up in the literature, and just like any and every angle I could to understand like what is going on here. What is true? What is real? And that gets back to kind of like who you are. That is the essence of who I am. Like, what is true? What is real? What is actually going on right now? That is like the central core of my being, and
Yeah.
that's how it expressed itself at the time.
So my next question is what surprising you the most about where you are now? But I'd love to add to that because the book, even in the title, it says experiment. Can you also add what also was the most surprising result, if we call it a result, or outcome, or whatever finding in the book?
Mm. I think the most surprising outcome to me was like somehow I thought that in the process of writing the book that maybe I would like, have this like outer world success, or that like something in the outer world would like confirm everything that I had been like working towards in my book. And what I noticed was that like after I wrote my book, I kind of entered a period of like postpartum depression. Like,
Mm.
almost as if like a mother is giving birth to this child and it's like, okay, like now I've given birth, like, some people enter those periods of depression, and it's like that was kind of my driving force for a very long time, of like the North Star. And when I wasn't focused and centered on that, it's almost as if like I started to kind of have like somewhat of an ontological crisis, in the sense of like, oh, um I started to like feel into levels of like doubt that I had never experienced before. And one thing that has really surprised me is just how much this theme is like the work of a lifetime, and that I feel like I'm continually being like taught lessons beyond the book and being tested with this kind of inner knowing. And it didn't just end with the book. And one of the things that like I also realized in the process is that the uncertainty, like your willingness to go into those places of uncertainty and even doubt, and even just like, I don't know, some people call it like the dark night of the soul. Your willingness to go there actually is an expression of you following your intuition, because sometimes we need to kind of like collapse our sense of what we know before we can actually start to understand what is true for us. It's like we kind of have to let go of what we believe to be true. And in that letting go, there can be a profound sense of uh, like confusion and disconnect and even grief involved in it. But sometimes we actually need to go to those places to emerge on the other side more real and more true and more grounded in our being. So I think one thing that surprised me is that, intuition is not just like flowers and roses and this like manifestation to like outer world success in the ways that we know it. It's actually like a deeper call to our soul, our spirit, our essence, however you want to call it. And that level of peace and groundedness that you develop a relationship with in your own body, I think is unmatched. It's unparalleled. Like anything can happen in the outer world, and yet when you are connected to that, it's almost as if like there's nothing greater, or there's nothing more, I think, to me at least, more like struggling for the word, but just yeah, nothing more true or real or yeah, like satisfying. That's the word,
Mm.
satisfying than that.
Well, I think you've given us such a great just platform to think about of being true to yourself and what intuition means. And you've really dived in so much to all these details and to give us things to think about. And that's really incredible. And I just reading your bio, I was like, oh, this is such a unique background and just a unique set of experiences in life. And you've really brought so much to the table. And you can tell that you've been able to take the time to think about all of this, but also just to express to us how important it is for all of us to do this kind of work. And Sophie, I have two more questions for you. Let's
Yeah.
call them rapid fire questions
Okay.
here that I really would love to hear your opinion on. And one of them is, how would you answer the question, why do we need to share, know about, and spread the positive news? Because we
Mm.
hear about all the bad. Why do we need the good?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a sense in which like what you focus on and what you choose to focus on actually kind of reflects and expands your reality. And there's a way in which like negative news can actually like change the way that we respond to our environment. It actually kind of creates this like tunnel vision where we get kind of activated and our nervous system gets dysregulated and we have less capacity to act and to be. And so, in a sense, like when we receive positive news, I think there's a sense where we can kind of ground into inspiration, and like a level of think a level of like an expanded repertoire of like what is possible for us. Like it kind of is like an inspiration feed in which it's a positive feedback loop. If we're given good news, we start to believe that it's possible to bring that out into the world. And so I think it's like a virtuous cycle in a sense.
Beautiful. And it's true. There more and more studies are coming out that show just the positive effects of positive news and the negative effects of too much negative news. So absolutely. And then finally, what advice would you give to someone who says, I see all that you're doing, I see how you're spreading all of these great thoughts into the world. I want to make a difference, but I don't know how to start.
I would go back to definitely reflect on past experiences that you've had and notice if there's anything that felt like something that just like made you happy or just made you settled in yourself and maybe journal that like what was that like for you. The other thing is um understanding like what a yes, no, and maybe is in your body. You can even ask your body, what is a yes? And just like notice what comes up. Body, what's a no? Body, what's a maybe? And just journal that too. Another thing is I'm thinking of is like, in the moments of your life, noticing like those small, subtle nuances of like basically as I described it in my own story of like the grain of sand. Like it
Mhm.
your intuition isn't usually like this huge like cataclysmic thing that like just like explodes your whole entire world. It can be like this really soft and subtle sense of grounding and rightness. And I think the last thing that I would name is that I'm starting to actually create like groups around the intuition experiment itself. So I want to call in people who are ready to go on a journey of experimenting with their intuition in community. So I'm going to be launching a program this year around basically the intuition experiment. So it's not going to be writing a book, but it is going to be delving into creative practice, into relational practice and mindfulness practice um, in community so that we can kind of co-create some really major things in the world together and not sacrifice ourselves along the way. And so if people want to or are interested in diving into this kind of intuition experiment, and it doesn't have to look the same way that I did, but just in the spirit of that experimentation, you know, I'll be posting some stuff like later this spring, and definitely welcome to follow me on my Instagram, Flow-intuit. You can DM me if you're interested with that. I don't have it all up and running yet, but I just wanted to kind of give that little teaser because it's something that I'm really excited about sharing with people, and especially in community, because I did it all alone, and I feel like my process towards like understanding these things would have been so much easier if I had done it like in community, in a group of like-minded folks.
Absolutely. And again, like I know I already mentioned how studies were showing about the good news, but I've also been reading so much about that idea of community and just social, what's the word? Being social in general and how much we do. We need people and we are our best selves when we can collaborate and can bring all of that into the fold. So absolutely follow Sophie on Instagram, and then also LinkedIn and Facebook you're on as well. And that will all be in the show notes. And Sophie, I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Thanks so much, Kate.
In taking classes over the years or observing workout videos, one major piece that is often missing: stressing safety and form. Additionally, group fitness classes are often marketed as being open to all levels, yet how often do instructors not give modifications nor progressions so that each participant truly can get what he or she needs out of the class? So that's why I created the 101 series, which take things back to basics with 3 separate courses: Bar 101, Pilates 101, and HIIT 101, focusing on safety and efficiency so you can maximize your workouts. Be confident when you step into a group fitness class or workout on your own. Be strong in your execution of the most common exercises, and be proud of yourself for taking these huge steps forward on your health journey. Check it out at bebykate.com. The link is in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening to Be the Good with Kate Chericello. Whether you're listening on YouTube or via podcast, it would mean the world if you liked, subscribed, and or left a review. You heard about the good? Now go out and be the good in your life this week. If you have stories of good news that need to be shared, please send me a message. Thanks again, and have a great week.